And so far we hope that you are benefiting from these short reminders, inshallah. We began with Al-Baqarah categorizing the opening into three distinct phases. A very brief introduction into the believers, a very brief introduction to the disbelievers, and then an expansion and expansion on infaq, munafiqeen and mufsideen, people who corrupt. And it's very important that the Quran tells us about the people who corrupt, who are corrupt or who corrupt. Whether they're corrupt in their personal lives, in their professional lives, or whether they aim to corrupt the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason is, Islam has inherent antibodies within the religion that prevent it from significant change. And these verses make you aware of the dangers that if you come across them, you need to guard yourself against them. So we mentioned certain attributes such as what they say and do are different. We mentioned the disease in their hearts. We mentioned that they spread corruption on the earth. And yesterday we mentioned وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, that when it is said to them, don't spread corruption on the earth, قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ, they say, we are absolutely peacemakers. We don't do that. But how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala respond to them? Does He say, accept these people at face value, those people who are corrupt or who attempt to corrupt the deen of Allah? He gives a strong retaliation in the Holy Quran, which itself is an injunction on how to respond to people who aim to practice corruption. Because it's very easy to be taken in by quick wins. Human beings like shortcuts. And that's why the warning is important. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ الْمُفْسِدُونَ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, that they are the mufsidun, but they do not perceive it. But it's not as simple as saying they are the mufsidun. The ayah begins Allah. Allah itself is a preposition. It's there to get your attention. Now each ayah itself should naturally get your attention, but when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Allah, it's like now you really need to pay attention. And then the word inna is also another emphatic response. Verily, absolutely. So Allah, inna, this is really asking for your attention. Humul mufsidun. Hum means they. And then this pronoun, they, hum, is repeated again. So it's inna humul. So you can imagine that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is drawing huge circles around these people, huge warning lights around these people. Allah, inna, humul. Look, these are the people, humul. And then it's not just humul fasi, it's al-mufsidun. So there is emphasis after emphasis after emphasis. If I can put that in modern terms, it's like writing a text message, but having 5 or 6 or 7 exclamation marks in that text message. It's like warning, 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 watch out, watch out. And this is unique in the Holy Quran's language. It's able to capture emotion within the body of the text. Unlike English, for example, if I say a phrase such as, oh, it's you, oh, it's you. Now that could be interpreted in many ways. It could be like, oh, it's you. It could be, oh, it's you. So the emotion is not captured in the language, in the body of the language. But in the Quran, the repetition and repetition and repetition is able to capture that urgency. And that's a miracle within the language itself. Humul mufsidun. Now a mufsid is different to a fasid. Fasid is a corrupt individual. So the word could have come humul fasidun, but mufsidun, a mufsid is a person who is corrupt but also corrupts others. And this is what the Quran is warning you against, that these are dangerous people. They entice you. It's subtle changes. It's not all of a sudden It's like, for example, when a young person, if you look at someone who is 40 or 50 or 60 years old and they're a smoker, if you look at their hands, they may have tar stains on both hands. They may be smoking with both hands by now. But when they first began, the person who introduced smoking to them did not put 2 cigarettes in both hands and say, go ahead and smoke. He would have said, just try it. Just take a puff, is the word that is used. 1 puff. I don't know what it is nowadays, but the equivalent of that word. So it's that very subtle thin end of the wedge that is captured, that they corrupt and they corrupt others. وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, but they don't perceive it. وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ is itself a punishment for them. So as I mentioned yesterday, that if you want to punish someone, make them lose their bearings. You know, so like, for example, we mentioned a canine. If it knows it's got 1.5 meters, it knows it's got that. And if it hits at the end of that, it's not that much of a problem. But if you really want to punish that canine, you give it 300 meters or 100 meters of rope, of lead. And then you see that when it starts running, it then hits a sudden stop. So that loss of perception is itself a punishment. The final verse that we'll reflect on today is the following verse, which is verse 13. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسُ قَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاءُ أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ السُّفَهَاءُ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. So when it is said to them, آمَنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسُ, when it is said to them, so now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about all these qualities of these hypocrites. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when people try to correct them, when it is said to them. Now this isn't, the phrase is generic. It's not like when somebody says it to them or when A said it to them. It's when it is said to them. It means again and again they're given reminders. Aminu, believe, kama amana nas, believe like other people. Now, think about it in practical terms. Let's say there's a group of friends and there are 8 friends in the group. 7 of them pray. They pray Fajr, Zohar, Asr, Maghrib and Isha. They don't smoke, they don't backbite, they pray, they pay zakat, they fast, they perform Hajj, Umrah. One of the 8, so 7 of them do it, one of them doesn't. He doesn't pray, he smokes a little bit of recreational drugs. When it is said to that person, why don't you believe like the others? Now what response would you expect from that person? You'd expect some remorse, right? Maybe one day. Or I should actually do that. But these people say, أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاءُ. It's such a vile thing they say in response. They say, you expect us to believe like these fools. Sufaha is fools. Why did they call, who were they addressing at the time? Who were these people who were believing at the time of the Quran? It was the Sahaba Kiram. So what was it in their minds? You have to reflect on these verses, that they called these people Sufaha. What it was is what was going through their minds was, these are people who are well established in Makkah al-Mukarramah. They had businesses, they had wealth, they had houses, they had respect, they were from the Quraysh, they were from the most noble of clans, and they left everything and they've come here almost completely bereft of worldly belongings on this so-called Iman. People migrate from one country to another, leave their parents, leave their heritage, leave everything behind. For economic migration, most of us in this room have that history, where somebody in our family decided to migrate to this country for economic means. So they say, this is something that is very foolish. But what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is their transaction was of Iman, وَأَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ السُّفَهَاءُ. That actually it is that mindset that thinks that is foolish. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects the believer and says that those who criticize or who try to put off that person from Iman, themselves are fools. وَلَكِنْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Now here, yash'urun is not here. This is the last word we're going to reflect on. Yash'urun came twice for the munafiqeen. They don't have perception. But ya'lamun is they do not know it. They do not have the understanding. So these words at the end, I know as Hufaz were like, ta'lamun, ya'lamun, yash'urun, but actually it has significance. Ya'lamun is the knowledge of. So they think they had knowledge that this was a wise thing and that was a foolish thing, but Allah says they have no knowledge base. So these ayahs are there to encourage us that in life, as we transit towards the deen of Allah, as we gravitate closer to Islam, we try to improve our iman, try to improve our taqwa and taharat, that these challenges will come our way. People will call you names. It's clear as day in the Quran. The Sahaba Kiram were given these unfortunate titles and labels. But Allah says, you don't need to engage with them, I deal with them, and whatever they call you, I call them back. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to overcome these hurdles, which are becoming more and more challenging in our time. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will be focusing on the next verse, which again talks about the munafiqeen. Just in closing, the last 60 seconds, just so you know where we're going. This ruku completes after about 4 to 5 more verses. We're doing 2 verses a day. Tomorrow, we've got two more verses, which is about the qualities of the munafiqeen. Then the day after, inshallah, there are 2 examples, which are fascinating examples about the munafiqeen, and then the ruku concludes, and then the topic changes. Okay? So that's where we are. I hope you're all following and enjoying, and I thank you so much for staying behind and for your attention. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ.